Hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. What follows is an edited version of a fireside chat with members of the Integral Life practice community. It is a wonderful privilege for me to share this longest afternoon of the year, in the Northern Hemisphere, that is, with smart, integrally inspired people who are doing their best to bring wisdom and friendliness to a world that always needs it. So what I'd like to do today is a little different from the typical sort of politics and war and the current events. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that has become a main topic of conversation for probably all of us on this call, and that is, so what are you watching? And that question itself gets to an amazing emergent for those of us who are interested in the evolution of culture. And that is the emergence of this new media sphere that we're all in, where we can watch anything from anywhere, anytime, basically, TV, movies, etc. YouTube's education, it's all there at the push of a button. And this is something that many of us, certainly me, have seen emerge within our lifetimes. It's not so long ago, I was alive then, when somebody could watch all the significant TV shows that there were to watch and see all the significant movies for the most part, even some from foreign countries. You know, if you lived near a city and there was a little art cinema. And, you know, again, evolutionarily speaking, we can see that that was at one point true of books as well. It's been said that somebody like Thomas Jefferson, maybe the middle of the 1700s, would be the last human where it would be possible to read every significant book that there was to read on any significant subject. And of course, now there's no end of books. Now there's no end. We can sit at the feet of the greatest teachers and storytellers of all time with no hope of getting all there is to get. So that's why what are you watching becomes a significant question, an important question, because you want to know what's good from the people you respect who find it worth their time. And I love this term that is arising around this in terms of measurements and metrics. We want to have unregretted hours spent online instead of addicted hours or distracted hours, unregretted hours where we're actually getting something for the time we're putting in. And so I'm going to start with something that you, Namali, turned me on to. And you turned me on to it with high praise. You said that this is the best TV show I've ever seen. And I think you watched it with your mother, and I think she said the same thing. And so Chuck and I watched it over a period of a summer, I think 2 summers ago. And we both said at the end of it that it was the best TV show we've ever seen. So let's just start there at the top. And the show I'm talking about is a show that still not a lot of people know of. It's called A French Village. It's a French TV show, 7 seasons, 72 episodes, high budget, high creativity. I don't know who's behind it, but whoever they were a genius at storytelling. And I would recommend it to everybody. The quick description on Google is this, says, tracing the experiences of various residents of a fictional small village just inside the occupation zone during World War II, who deal with issues including collaboration, the resistance, the fate of the French Jews, and war profiteering. And that is the quickest possible synopsis, but it is so sprawling, so beautifully cast. The story is so impeccably told. And what I like about it and what's possible these days that wasn't possible just a couple decades ago is that this is a French TV show about their history. I don't want an American TV show about their history. I mean, maybe I do. Maybe it's good. And God knows there have been some good ones, including Dunkirk, I must say, and others. But to see it, the French tell this very significant story using the best of their abilities in 2009 is just something that adds to the sort of karmic louche of it, the liquid sort of reality of it. And one of the things I would point out about the French Village that'll keep you in the game, not that you need to be, it'll pull you through easily, but the ending is just magnificent. It's often observed that one of the hardest things about telling a story, writing a story, is how to end it. And in this case, you know, we all know how the French occupation by the Nazis ended. The war was over. But how do you bring it home to today, or do you? Or did you just leave it there in 1945 after telling a magnificent story? You get a nice panoramic wide shot and the end comes up. Would have been fine. But they were too good to just do that. Because, you know, again, this was made in 2009, and many of the characters in the show that you came to know and love are still alive. You know, they're old now. It's 2009. What are they feeling? What's going on there? And so they took a completely different aesthetic turn at the end, different creative approach. And it was unexpected. It was very, I think, risky, but it was thrilling. And just, I don't know, the icing on the cake of a true work of art. So, yeah. So that's my favorite. And A French Village, check it out. And I'll share a couple of my other favorites with you. And I want you to consider what would be in that category for you. So you can share that with a couple others and with all of us if you want. And, you know, what's the interesting integral angle on it, if there is one. So, next, I'll tell you about one of my least favorite, in this case, a movie. And this is another one from Namali. Namali is a good curator of the mediaverse for me. And in this case, she said, Jeff, there's this movie, everybody's talking about it in the integral world. We got to go see it at the theater. So we did. We were among the first. It had just opened, but it had gotten a lot of buzz. And it is a movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And so we saw this movie. We sat there and watched it. And at the end of it, when it was finally over, Namali looked at me. You know how you look at somebody, you just seen a movie, are we going to agree, are we going to disagree? I look at Namali and she looks up at me and said, that was the worst movie I've ever seen. And I agree. I thought I literally couldn't wait for it to be over and was so relieved when it was. Yet, it was, I just read about it in Wikipedia, the most awarded film of all time, when you consider all the SAGs and the Academy Awards and all the different award shows. The most awarded film of all time, 11 Academy Award nominations and 7 wins, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Original Screenplay, Best Editing. These are not small awards. And so, you know, in some ways, I still don't get it, but it's interesting. And I think it's interesting evolutionarily, too. I'm going to read the first review on Google. If you go Google it, they have all the reviews. Here's the very first paragraph of the very first review, and I think it says a lot. And of course, he's getting 5 stars from this person. He writes, this movie is easily going to be my top 10 favorites of all time list. I absolutely love the concept of the multiverse and all the different versions and ideas of it that people have. So I'm maybe a tad bit biased, but this movie is genuinely near perfection in every way. There were so many places where everything could have gone completely wrong and ruined the whole film had it been done differently, but that didn't happen. It manages to be so freaking chaotic and all over the place throughout its entire runtime, while somehow also being completely down to earth and sensible enough that I feel that anyone could understand and follow how everything worked and what was happening and not be bored or overwhelmed. So, not really bored and overwhelmed here, you know. And but again, this is one of the things, I don't know, maybe it's integral, maybe it's just maturity, but I don't think that means it's bad. I didn't like it. I didn't get it. but clearly it wasn't. People loved it. You could see the results. So, it's not that it was bad. This is how I interpret it. And Namali, I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say too. But it's not bad as much as it was sort of beyond me. And I mean, evolutionarily speaking, in the sense that I don't think my mind will ever in this lifetime be able to process the complexity required to appreciate that movie somehow. It was just too much. And it's like video games. It's an art form that to me is the province of people younger than me. It just seems to turn out that way. I made it to Pac-Man, but after that, it was goodbye forever to this great art form. It's a bigger box office than cinema. And, just watched it go into the infinite new sea of reality. So, this is about the multiverse, everything everywhere all at once. It's about a lot of cultural references I don't think I get, the googly eyes and the hot dog fingers and things like that. I don't know where they come from. And to me, here would be the question to me as to, is this movie green or is it integral? Or, it's probably both. I think we could have some assumption there. But in what way? Because it's very deconstructive. It's very everything all at once. So that's very green in a sense. It's just, there's the whole kaleidoscope of life is there. But is there some way in which it's flying in formation? And if there is, that would be some sort of an integral impulse that's coming online, it would seem to me. Apparently there was. I didn't get it. But I will say this one last detail. That the first 20 minutes of the movie were, I was so excited. I remember settling down in my seat thinking, oh my God, this is going to be one of the best movies I've ever seen. And it took a turn. So I'll put it that way. Okay, so on to more favorites. Okay, so one that's fresh in my mind because Chuck and I just watched it and we just finished it about a month ago. We watched it all through the winter, was Downton Abbey. And I resisted Downton Abbey for a long time because it seemed kind of soap opera-ish and I wasn't sure I'd like it. But I did. I loved it, actually. And I realized that that's true, that my initial resistance is true of a lot of what turns out to be my favorite shows. I watch them years after they're out. So I think of The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, even The French Village. I waited years to watch it. And I guess maybe I want to see if it stands the test of time. I don't know exactly what, but I think that's probably a good sign if it's still respected years, at least a few years later. And so Downton Abbey is the story of the emergence of modernity into a high traditional world in England, starting basically in the late 1800s and moving through the 1920s. And it's the story of a big house, Downton Abbey, and these big houses, they called them, they were the center of society. They basically owned the land, they owned the town, the people were tenants, the people worked for them. It was not a bad life considering the life of earlier times. And yet, the march of progress. And so we have industrialization, the electricity, the telephone. I think one of the funniest scenes to me was at the very beginning, the Dowager Countess, who is the old lady, she's the grandmother of the estate. This is played by Maggie Smith. And it's just an amazing performance for all of the seasons. And Maggie Smith is an old lady, and she's well into her 80s now. And she carried this role. And in one of the first scenes is where she's coming into the drawing room, and they have an electric light. And she said, "Oh, the glare." And yet, here it comes: electricity, the telephone, World War I. And it's just, you see the, how untenable, how untenable that life was as modernity rolled in. First of all, the son, the Earl, the son of the Countess, he couldn't manage the place. He had to do what a lot of these earls and nobility and aristocrats did. he came to America and married an heiress so that he could have enough money to keep things going. And that worked out for a couple of decades. But still, at some point, it just becomes untenable for the younger generation to wear a tuxedo and a gown for dinner every night. It's just mind-numbing. And so you just feel the consciousness arising after World War I, and the communications and the phonograph. And you realize just how much of drama, great literature, great stories of all time are centered around the conflict between emerging and resisting stages of development. New stages of development coming online. In this case, modernity coming out of traditionalism. But a lot of coming of age, cultural coming of age stories, you might say. And I think of The Sopranos. It's true of The Sopranos. Even think of the intro of The Sopranos, driving with that, woke up this morning, got myself a gun. And he's driving from the mean city streets to this manicured suburban house. And this is Tony, the vicious mobster, who is having panic attacks. So this is that sort of red warrior mob consciousness encountering modernity. And even post-modernity, he sees a psychiatrist. And what an interesting story it is, and how much it tells in terms of development. And then there's Game of Thrones, which is in some ways interesting and conspicuous because it doesn't tell that story. It's one of the shows I can point to where nothing evolves. It's sort of this medieval kingdom of brutality for thousands of years, and nothing changes. And yet that's interesting because in some ways that's true of human history. It certainly change was not discernible in the thousands of years of warrior consciousness and traditional consciousness as well. Thousands of years where not much changed until, it did. The modernity came in. Another one I think of that I love, watched it over a period of a summer. And I think it was last summer. And that's a show called The Last Kingdom. Another one I had not heard of, but it's like Game of Thrones, a little more comic bookish, maybe, but not in a way that's objectionable. I liked it for that. And it takes place in 8th century England. And it's historical in a sense. It's King Alfred fighting the Vikings. So again, these stages of consciousness in conflict, the Red Warrior Vikings coming down and raiding the farmers, trying to Christian, small towns, kingdoms, and the conflict between those two, which went on for hundreds of years, and in very interesting ways, where, it wasn't just like red stayed red and blue stayed blue, in terms of traditional versus warrior. Finally, the Vikings they couldn't resist it. They became traditionalists too. They became farmers. They became Christians. And, you see the movement of history. And in this show, The Last Kingdom, it's carried very well by the main character, Uhtred, who was born aristocratic and was raised till he was maybe 12. And the Vikings raided, kidnapped him, and then he became a Viking. And that, of course, happened. Raiding parties would kill the men, rape the women, and take the kids. That's just standard procedure at that stage of development. So that's what happened. And great show. All right. So sort of phenomena or something I'm looking for these days, I think from, Integral being a source of this quest of mine, is to find shows that transmit history in a way that is honoring of history the way it was experienced in its time, and not, which is what art does all the time. There's nothing wrong with it per se, is we put our frame of consciousness back in historical drag. There's a lot of that that's been going on for a long time. It's, it's from the Lone Ranger and Tonto, whatever it might be. I think of it sometimes as the Flintstone effect. It's like, yeah, we have Fred and Wilma Flintstone, but they're basically the honeymooners from the 50s, minus the domestic violent threats. Jackie Gleason, To the Moon, Alice, remember that? And the Flintstones is that, a cartoon version of that takes place in the Stone Age, but it's a transference of the sensibility of the basically America in the 50s, as is the Jetsons, also interesting because it's the future and they have all these gadgets and everything, but Jane, his wife, can't think of anything better to do than stay home and, wear her little skirt and apron. So, that's what happens, but there's the one person I would point out that is really trying to do authentic sensibilities in history is the filmmaker Dave Eggers. And he just, I guess it's probably a year ago now, released a movie called The Northman, which is a Viking movie with Alexander Skarsgård. And it's really, let me see if I can see what he wrote about it here. Well, at any rate, it's a very brutal movie. There's a lot of magic to it. There's not, in some ways, a narrative drive like there is in most Viking movies. There's sort of this revenge thing going on. There's a lot of sort of impressionistic kind of mystical thinking. And I loved it. And I particularly loved his previous movie called The Witch, subtitle A New England Folktale. And it's about a time in American history that, first of all, really fascinates me. It's a time of the Puritans, and it's a world of magic, black magic, possession, these things that arise when life conditions for people are extreme, which is how they were in pre-modernity for the most part. And now you're moving from traditional, on a good day, England to the wilds of North America. And so it's really a big step down. You're moving into almost a hunter and gatherer kind of a life condition. And people in that era, and I, read a lot of history and so forth, they're living in a world of spirits, good spirits, God, salvation, but also devils and witches. And that's what was the reality here. This is 1630 when this movie took place. And it's a walled town in New England. They don't really say where. And it's a story of a family, a father, a mother, 5 children, who are cast out of the walled community. That's always the fear at that stage, is you're going to be cast out of the village. And the reason they're cast out is because they're even more crazy religious than the regular Puritans. So again, in this world, people aren't really thinking about freedom of expression or living your dream. They're into conformity. And you got to support the leader. You got to play by the rules. You got to do what you're told. And if you don't, there's no extra capacity in the town to be able to handle you, psychically or physically. You can't accommodate you. So you're shunned. You're cast out, which is standard procedure and often means death for the whole family. So that's what's happening here. So the family goes out into the woods. What is such an archetypal metaphor for early humans all around the globe, where you're basically on the edge of nature, which is just full of spirits and all kinds of stuff, all the stuff of myth and magic. So the family, they do survive. They found a meadow in the wilderness. They built a farm. They surrounded it by the fields, and they didn't have any other adults to relate to. They had a bunch of kids, and at some point their dark imaginings start to get the best of them, and they are beset by a series of tragedies, And they begin to see the work of the devil and sorcerers and witches at work all around them, including in each other. And particularly, they focus on one child, adolescent girl, that they begin to scapegoat, that is, drive all evil into it. And I won't go into much more, except to say that there is a thrilling authenticity to it. And this is Dave Eggers, his thing. That's his artistry is doing this, and with the Northmen and with this one called The Witches. They actually built the cabin that the family lived in to completely authentic specifications. They planted the farm. They filmed as the crops were growing in chronological order. They did all the interior scenes with open flame lighting as best they could, at least. And one of the best things about it that I love is that they went back and drew real dialogue from people's diaries and written court records and prayer manuals and Cotton Mather's accounts of witchcraft. And here's what Robert Eggers said about it. He said, I would find and take phrases out of all of them and line them up, and had phrases that had to do with the devil and phrases that had to do with being happy and phrases that had to do with being sad. And he worked these phrases into the dialogue. So it has that, real transmission. The downside is it's hard to understand. And I saw it in the theater the first time, and I didn't really know what they were saying much. But subtitles come to the rescue. And I watched it again a couple of weeks ago, and so good. Yeah, the music was thrilling, acting amazing. The critics gave it 90%, the viewers only 54%. And a lot of people I know were frustrated by the movie and also frustrated by the Northman. And, again, one of the toughest things is doing the ending. And this one is so good because it could have been ambiguous, mysterious, enigmatic. They could have just had the end come up as they did a shot of the forest, but they didn't. They went into a specific, vivid, perspective-shattering ending, and I recommend it. All right, so in terms of just one more example I want to use here, and this is another one of a creative movie maker who I don't really like his work. This is one I don't like. And that's Taylor Sheridan. I don't like his stuff. He's the Yellowstone guy. I took 3 stabs at Yellowstone because they have a lot of shirtless lumberjacks. It's like, and I wanted that. I like that part. But, it just never grabbed me because there was something missing. And so anyway, he comes out with the show 1883. And this is the story of the Dutton family, which is the Yellowstone family, in the earlier cowboys. You're right. Sorry about that. Hang on. So this is sort of the prequel to Yellowstone. And it's about the wagon trains west in 1883. It stars Faith Hill and her husband, Tim McGraw. And I was excited about it because I love that era in history. And I had read good things about it. And I actually thought I enjoyed it for the first few episodes, in a sense. What really pulled me along was the huge budget, the authentic. They were very authentic to the wagon trains, how they looked, how they camped, the actual machinations of the wagon train were very good. And, I know a thing or two about that. I like that sort of thing. And, but the problem was the writing was modern, and the sensibility to me was modern and even postmodern. It's like liberals' ideas of conservatives. You see a lot of that in the media and in entertainment, because most of the people making entertainment are not traditionalists, or never have been in many cases. So it's always something I smell and feel. And this is a story of, it focuses on a young girl. Of course, the protagonist has to be female, fair enough, but that is an iron rule at this stage of the game. And she's coming of age, And she's Hollywood beautiful, and that's all good. And I could see Faith Hill's work done, and that does bother me. And good old Maggie Smith in Downton Abbey, she didn't have any work done until the last couple seasons. I don't know. I have this theory that human beings, we're going to get all kinds of work done. We've all had our teeth fixed, except me. And that will continue to happen. We see it in other countries, particularly. We see it here too. And then at some point in our evolution, we're going to get tired of that, and we're going to see the beauty of aging. This body positivity thing is actually going to move to the last bastion, which is aging. And I think that's probably a couple generations from now, but that's my prediction, and we'll just have to wait and see. But at any rate, in the meantime, that kind of does bother me. And even this, the Faith Hill character is kind of Faith Hill. She's kind of assertive and she's sassy. And Tim McGraw is kind of taciturn and doesn't have much to say. He's kind of Tim McGraw. And I'll read a little excerpt. This is from the narrator, who is this young girl, I believe Elsa. Yeah, it's Elsa. And she narrates the whole thing. And here's some of what she says. She says, "So much I don't know about life. We learn to read, we learn rules, learn scripture and manners, and how to avoid saying or doing things that make others uncomfortable. All those things seem to be the opposite of life. Seem so strange. Now I'm sleeping on the edge of civilization, and we leave the edge behind. There are no rules. I remember stories of the Great War, how it seemed man had lost all reason, that we'd become animals, or perhaps just surrendered to the fact that animals is all we've ever been. Freedom to most is an idea, an abstract idea that pertains to control. That's not freedom, that's independence." And on and on and on she goes with this kind of modern existential nonsense in that context, where people would have been religious, they would have been superstitious. The one religious character in the whole show is Faith Hill's sister, Claire, who is presented as a fanatic. They all were. Fanatics are, they serve their role in development. And things become so bad, she kills herself in the second episode. So that's it. No more of that sort of magic myth sensibility that I find missing in all of his work. So that's my complaint about Taylor Sheridan. All right. Okay. That's what I had, some of what I had to share anyway. Why don't we share with each other? We can put people in groups of 4 for 15 minutes, as we normally do. And in this case, I'd invite you to share some of your favorite shows. What are you watching? Because I want to hear about it. You can put it in the chat, and we'll have a little open mic here at the end. But for the next 15 minutes, let's do groups of 4. Share what you're watching, what you're liking, any integral insights, what you're not liking. Some of what I did. So is that good? But yeah, I hope you had a good discussion with your friends, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Also, to bring back from the table the argument for everything, everywhere, all at once. Love to hear that. And if you are interested in sharing, raise your hand. And in the meantime, Namali and I were talking, and Namali brought up this whole big. Well, first of all, the idea of how is media an ILP? An integral practice. And, Namali, I invite you to share about that. But, the thing that comes to mind is that it's a little bit like what I was doing when I was talking about what I liked and didn't. It's an opportunity. It's such a good map. It has such explanatory value. I mean, it really does. So that you can see the cosmic address of the person who's making the show. You factor that in. The cosmic address of the characters, your cosmic address, that's a practice right there. What type you are, what the stage it's coming from, what state does it evoke? These are very, very helpful. It's like moving the thing on the Google map. You just see more resolution in all of it. So Namala, you were talking about this big category of reality shows, and you mentioned one that you had actually told me about a couple of years ago, and I did watch a couple, and you're right, it was great, called The Repair Shop.
Yeah, again, there's just such the arts and the media really truly is, I think, an integral life practice, because it shakes you out of your perspective. Sometimes you can take new perspectives, you can break your old perspectives, you can be shocked into new perspectives, and talk about state experiences. Like, I remember still walking out of the theater having watched Dunkirk, for example, and just like just really feeling it. Another movie was the Hidden Life for me, just walking to my car and feeling like I'm gonna throw up. I'm gonna throw up because it touched me and it moved me so much. 3 hour long movie. Yeah. And just gripped by it the whole time, you know. So The Repair Shop was something that is one of my favorite shows. It's an actual little repair shop, like a cottage somewhere in England, and people bring things to it that they inherited from their great grandfather or, you know, whatever. So like sometimes there are things like a toy that somebody's great great grandfather built out of broken pieces of wood from a plane that he flew at the First World War or something like that. And it's a repair shop which is not bringing these old items into like brand spanking, like new shiny objects. Rather, it's restoring them to their dignity. And so one of the items that I just will never forget is one family brought a violin that was really like, you know, broken. They brought a violin and they explained that the violin was what their great great grandmother had played at Auschwitz. And this is fresh to me because I just visited Auschwitz about a month ago. Yeah, you know, the Nazis forced people to sometimes play music when the trains arrived at Birkenau, as though like, oh, you're coming to this wonderful place. And how these experts at the repair shop, these restorers, the care that they took to not remove her fingerprints that they could still find on the violin. And rather they restored it to a playable violin without removing the story of the violin. And so, yeah, just I would like sob watching some of these shows.
No, it's you know, one of the sort of integral transmissions is sort of the transmission itself, that they're going for the karma. You know, they're actually bringing that sense of time and place and dignity to the fore, and we get to be there for that. That's amazing, you know. And again, perspective shaking, adding, all that good stuff. So speaking of which, so Everything Everywhere All at Once. Let's go back to that, because that was about multiple perspectives, right? What overload maybe for me, but what do you think? So Nina, does Nina have her hand raised?
Yeah, I don't have my hand up, but I'm here. And I mean, I don't know what to say about why I liked it. I was thoroughly entertained by the silliness and the goofiness. I'm goofy, so I like the sausage fingers. I think I just like that they were jumping into different timelines and in it. It helped me to think about what's going on in other dimensions that I'm not aware of right now in this moment. So yeah. I think that's why I liked it, is it because it made me think about what might be going on that I'm completely unaware of.
Oh boy, well, what a question that is. And you know, I'd be grateful to any work of art that would evoke that in me. I'm glad it did in you. And you know, it makes me want to reconsider and maybe rewatch it at some point. When it's on a small screen and I'm not surrounded.
Torture yourself.
Yeah, so I was more really impressed by it. Honestly, I think it's hinting towards the opening of this AI explosion time, where it's like there's a million stories happening at once, and what's the through line? And in that movie, it seemed like it was orienting towards the end about, especially when a time is super chaotic, everyone be kind, like as a default mode. Try to like engage, like recognize that it's all confusing for all of us. So like don't lead with hurting someone. And I think that's such a deep integral impulse. And the way it plays out isn't just a sweet kindness. It actually was saying, how can I be kind to this person in a way that actually makes them happy? So there's a scene where she's going up the staircase with kung fu moves and like is specifically doing the happy things for each person. And then they all of a sudden find their happy place and they stop warring against each other. And then there's a thread of, which is similar in the Matrix trilogies, of there's obviously a dichotomy between eternalism and nihilism, or permanence and nothingness, and the hyper fragmentation of nothingness that's embodied by that chaotic impulse that's going to destroy the multiverse of whatever with the daughter. That there's a surrender or an acceptance of the nothingness towards the end. It's like, okay, this is what you want, I allow it. And in that allowance was the autonomy or the like self-rooted identity of the daughter being like, I don't know what this is. My identity is utterly splashed open, and I'm with you in that confusion. And that coherence in the decoherence, I think, is like a very strong integral move. But to get there, you have to totally be shaken in the snow globe of utter vomitous, chaotic, hyper fragmented, green, gone wild, crazy explosion.
Well said. Yeah, right on. Thank you, Dragpa. Again, more inspiration to give it another shot. And I didn't get any of that, so I appreciate it. Karen?
Yeah, wow. Now, after what Drogpa said, now I want to go back and watch it again, because I didn't quite get that. I wouldn't have put it together like that. What came up for me was that about a few minutes in, or 5 minutes in, I had to just surrender any sense of trying to make sense of it at a rational, coherent. I just had to totally let go of that part of me and just allow it. It was kind of like a total surrender to your guru or to your God or whatever. Just let it happen. And I mean, I love pieces of it that crazy. Whatever Drogpa call it, the green gone wild. It was so green gone wild that the through line that came through, the pieces that stayed as I just let it wash past, was that this ended up being a very pro-life movie and a pro-life message at a time when the green gone wild, as our green leading edge breaks down under the impact of the new emerging integral era, what we tend to see is what's breaking down, and all time, all present, all at once. I mean, that is a spiritual insight, but it's crazy making to the intellect. So having completely surrendered the rational intellect, and then following just the crazy pieces, loving the sausage fingers, loving the kung fu fanny pack. I mean, you wear a fanny pack, that is so uncool. But then the first martial art thing where the anti-hero husband, nerd husband, is this super martial arts hero, and his weapon is this fanny pack that he's doing these amazing just enjoying the craziness. And what we were up against was this absolute nihilistic despair of green gone wild, which is so present today. I mean, that really resonated all through. I mean, this is why a lot of the mass shooters, they are existential despair, and they take a gun, they shoot other people and shoot themselves. That's kind of the ultimate expression of nihilistic despair. And the message, the final message, and Drungpa articulated it better than I can, was so pro-life and pro-kindness, prajna and karuna, compassion and insight, and allowing and being with each other, being present with each other. And I love the existential bagel of despair, the everything bagel, which turned out to be the symbol of utter despair. I mean, there's so much fun stuff in it, but the basic through line was the medicine that we need right now, to me.
Okay. All right. Well, why didn't I see that? What's wrong with me?
And me.
And you. Maybe it's just
you and I, we have each other, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, God. Yeah, no, totally. This is so good. And I mean, if I had heard that description, I'd say, boy, I'm for that kind of a movie. Yeah, deconstruct, blow my mind, and then give me some through line. I didn't get the through line. I got the mind blown, but fair enough. All good. Anyone else?
So one of my all-time favorite shows was Homeland, the political espionage thriller. And I had seen it, the plodding along 1 week at a time for 7 years, which you forget everything that happened the previous season. But then it was all available, and I watched it all pretty much all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved it. And what got me watching it again was this, I can't cite a quality source here, but somebody had said that it was the show that actual intelligence officers thought was the best. So
Very
I
good.
thought, okay, time to watch it again.
Yeah. No, I loved it too. It was Claire Danes, and every episode very good at suspense, edge of the seat kind of stuff. Loved it. Cheryl?
I don't know if I can put these in an integral lens, but these are two and then a third movie that I've just really enjoyed in the last little while. And one was The Quiet Girl, which is a Gaelic movie. It's the first, I think, that's ever been done in Gaelic, and The Banshees of Inisherin.
Oh,
And what I really love about those movies is how slow they are. And the cinematography is just gorgeous. There's just so much on what's going around these people, but there's also the acting is incredible in these, and the shots are all real close-ups. And so Colin Farrell, and I'll watch just about anything that Colin Farrell is in, and Brandon Fraser. I think these two people, incredibly amazing actors who do so little with their acting, like to have those close-ups of people's faces, and you just see a little something in their eye, or just a little twitch or a shoulder that drops. It's just also incredibly subtle. And my ability to just be in there with them it's very moving. I find it really, really touching. And then there's a scene about a donkey in the Banshees that just would break your heart. And then just on a slightly different kind of movie, I was so taken with Colin and Brendan that I heard that the director that did Banshees chose them because he had done a movie called In Bruges with them, which is a movie about two assassins.
Yeah.
And the chemistry between those two is incredible.
Yeah.
Like to just watch two people interact that way, and the humor is gorgeous. So it's just something about that's psychological that I'm just really, really enjoying right now. And then again, that just beautiful cinematography and quiet, just really, really quiet, very little action.
Yeah. Thank you. No, that's very true. And I loved both In Bruges and the Banshees. I haven't seen The Quiet Girl, but I'll add it to the list. Anyone else? All right. Well, that means we're complete, perfect, and whole once again.
I might also, when it comes to sort of expanding perspectives and just exposing ourselves to all these kinds of media, another really incredible source of entertainment and learning these days are YouTube channels. There are a gazillion different incredible YouTube channels that are, beyond the education you can get from TV or whatever. People just whether it's a travel channel or a philosophy channel or a religion channel or whatever, mathematics channel, or it's just stunning what YouTube channels are there right now.
No. A friend of mine just showed me a channel of it's a Guatemalan grandmother making tortillas, and she has a cooking show out of her little shack kind of thing, open fire, and it's got hundreds of thousands of views. Just that kind of thing. It's just if you can imagine it, there it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the Japanese movie Drive My Car was really impressive. I think it won in Oscars Best Foreign Film. It really seemed like a very solid integral level expression. A Chekhov director who had a big loss recently, and his directing style is to have all these people who speak different languages get so good at what the literal story, like the literal lines of a story is, that they no longer are using the language to communicate, but they're just directly creatively responding to each other in real time within the container of the Chekhov play. So
Wow.
that's basic.
And wait, so Drive My Car, a Japanese movie, and it's based on a Chekhov play?
It's about a director.
Oh.
He's an expert of Chekhov plays. He goes through this giant, heartbreaking, unexpected, surprising loss. And then he still goes into running this a film festival of an upcoming Chekhov play. They audition for it. There's someone who's deaf, someone who speaks Mandarin, someone who speaks English, all these people speak different languages, literally don't understand what they're saying to each other. And then they sit down with his method, repeatedly go over the lines so much that then they just viscerally play off each other without knowing what the other's saying verbally, but just from knowing the framework of the play in their own language. And it brings this whole coherence thing together with, so all these languages, but it really becomes this pulse of this through line is like so elegant and beautiful and quiet. And he's driven around by a driver. And I mean, it's just, honestly, it was the most surprising, like constant rug pulling movie I've ever seen.
Oh,
but in the quietest way, like layer after layer of these like total surprise twists. I mean, yeah, it was gorgeous.
Well, we have to watch it tonight. I mean, Drive My Car.
Yeah, it's long and quiet, but worth it.
Oh, yeah, you inspired me to watch. Damali, you're nodding in assent, yes. All right, well, I think we're good. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so fun to hang out with you. And I won't be here 2 weeks from now. We were doing the first and third Wednesdays, but the next first Wednesday is the 5th of July, and I'm going to be on a little trip. So I'll see you in a month, but I look forward to it. Happy summer, everybody's. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
It's been wonderful.
Until next time.